Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and this book right here is super controversial. Has to be one of the most controversial books that I've ever read that just really it just makes sense, okay? So the book is titled Man of the House, a handbook for building a shelter that will last in a world that is falling apart by C.R. Wiley. And here it is right here, and the author name down there. By the way, if I said the author's name wrong, it's not on purpose. It's just because I tend to do those things, okay? However, guys, when I actually read this book, believe it or not, this book is literally falling apart. I can literally pull the pages out, like page by page. I read this book by accident, okay? A friend of mine actually, went to the US. He left this book here, and I was like, well, I want to read it. And then I just read it, and all of a sudden, I fell in love with the ideas in this book that led me literally to start questioning just about everything. Now, when I say controversial, it's not like I'm saying the book is trying to be controversial. The book is just really saying things that used to be perfectly fine that today just seem like obsolete, seem controversial, seem like, hey, you're not making sense, that's not fair, but it really does make sense. So as you watch this video, I'm going to be asking you guys questions, the same questions that led me to start questioning things also. It's a very good book. Does it talk about money and finance? Of course it does. Does it talk about financial independence? Of course it does. Does it talk about productive property? Of course it does. And all those little points, I'm going to touch it in this video also. Now, if you guys don't know me, my name is TommyBryson, and do me a favor and smash the like button. Now, the very first thing, guys, is I basically learned that what we understand today as financial independence or independence as a whole, basically, I am here, I am fully independent, I do everything myself, is pretty much an illusion. Independence as a whole is an illusion. The only independent person is basically God, and everything else, like us, we're basically dependent on something. Although we have the idea that I am independent because I have a job and I live alone and my parents don't take care of me. We think that basically that is independence. Or people that say, I make a lot of money and I'm independent because I can do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do. The truth is, you're still dependent also. Now, here are some of the illusions that I basically figured out also. Number one is going to be the government. We depend on the government to basically fix our problems, to basically educate our kids, and to also take care of us in our old age via Social Security. And you might say, I'm not being dependent because I pay into those things, but in reality, there's no money for that, okay? So what's really happening is it's kind of like more people keep putting money into it, and those people are really supporting you. So it's like still dependency. We also depend on companies to give us our livelihoods, okay? A company I work at, I make money. With that money, I can pay for my shelter, my utilities, my groceries, my transportation, and everything else, okay? We are all dependent. So the question is not about, hey, how can I become independent? But the real question to be asking as you read this book, as you watch this video is, what do you want to be dependent on? And for me, when it comes to my family, I want to depend not on the government, not on money, for example, but I want to depend on my family for my family, the raising of my children, and everything else on my family as a whole. And then when it comes to what do I want to do for income and where would I want to make my money from, the answer is I don't want to depend on, I want to get this career and I want to be this and I want to be that. I want to depend from productive property. I want to be able to have stocks. I want to be able to have real estate. I want to be able to have land. Not for the sense of I want abundance, because that's not my goal, but I want to be able to make that money passively to take care of the needs that I basically have. So that way I don't have to spend time making money and keep making that trade because it is an expensive one. So that's the first question this book is going to lead you down. You're not independent. You'll never be independent. So what do you actually want to depend on? It's like a twist, but it's very true. Now, number two, guys, the second thing I basically learned as I watched this book was basically a home is no longer a home anymore. Now, unfortunately, I have experienced this firsthand. I have gone to homes where I've noticed that is true. And I don't really have experience with the whole real home as a nuclear family. My mom was raised in one of those families where in the home you had my grandma taking care of everything. My grandpa was basically working and bringing in income, and my grandma was at home trying to make some substitute income by selling goats or like selling things here and there. And all the kids, every single kid in that house had a role, to plant things, to grow things, to help with something. It was like the actual home was like a business in a sense. Like people were actually there. But these days, I've been part of homes, and I won't give much details because I want to be vague on purpose because I really wouldn't want to, like give too much information on this stuff. But I've been part of homes where basically you have two parent households where each parent goes to individual jobs, where the kids get sent to a high school, for example. Kids come back after 6 to 7 hours from school. Parents come back from like about 8 to 9 hours from work, and they come back and everyone's around the table and they're talking about basically how work went, how school went. Everything pauses, things get picked up, and then people go to their rooms, and then basically everyone keeps living this individual life in a way, right? And is that really a home? And what is the true benefit in that? Okay, I don't see it anymore, So I would like to have a home where the home is the actual nucleus, where kids aren't just there going to school and coming back, where parents aren't just going to work and bringing food or whatever, but it's actually a family. And that's missing from our culture these days, okay? Now, the third thing, guys, is going to be wife and slave wage. By the way, when you say things like that, it's kind of like, wait, what are you talking about here, right? But the whole idea that dependent on your role and dependent on what you do, that equals your value, it's ridiculous, okay? And I don't agree with it. The value of a person is not based on like who they are or their character and their morals and all this stuff. Like that's some cool stuff that we kind of hear. But the true thing is, as a Christian, I believe the value comes from who created you, and the value comes from God. So we all have equal value because we all come from God in a way. That's the whole idea. So if as a man, my role is, for example, to go out there and get a job and use that job to get money, to provide for the family. If my wife is staying at home, does that mean she's of lesser value than I am? The answer is, of course not. It used to be that if a woman stayed home and she took care of the kids, the house, her husband, and all those things, like it was good. It was a good thing. It was a normal thing. But these days, it's almost like you're wasting your talents. You should be out there doing something else. You know why that is? As I read this book, Man of the House, I was also reading another book, and that book is called Your Money or Your Life by Vicky. And I learned something in that book, and that book basically taught me that work is something you do for money. And not all work has to be paid, okay? I said a job is something you do for money, but work is things that are basically is an activity that can be purposeful and meaningful. So a woman staying at home, that is work, and a job is something you do for wages. But to say that this is less valuable than this, the truth is, of course it isn't, okay? And these days, when you think about it, it happens a lot. You have a man who's working, and you have another woman who's basically working also, and the family itself, like the kids and everybody else, is being raised by other people in a way, either babysitters or you have the school, and no one is really doing that job. And in pursuit of what? In pursuit of a career, in pursuit of going up a corporate ladder, in pursuit of getting more money, in pursuit of getting more things. And in reality, you don't really need those things, when you really put things into perspective. I highly recommend this book, okay? But the core idea here is you have to question, what is the alternative? When people are basically frowning at a woman staying at home and taking care of the family, and when you also have women that stay at home and they take care of the family and they feel bad about it because they're thinking, I'm wasting my talents here. And the truth is, a lot of the times they become wage slaves where they're basically working a job just to make money, to feel like they have an identity, to feel like you're being useful in a way. But it's not like you're less useful if you're at home. You know what I mean? So it's a very crazy perspective, to what we have today versus what was back then, okay? It's a very good thing to question and ask why. I think when you look back to the end, you're not asking yourself, I wasted my time raising my kids, over I should have been a bigger person in the corporate world or whatever it is. Okay, it's a very interesting thing. Number four, guys, is kids and dogs. This is kind of crazy, but it's true. You can ask people, do you prefer kids or do you prefer a dog? And a lot of folks will tell you, I'd rather have a dog. A dog is, it cuddles, company, time, but it's not that much responsibility. Kids I really don't like. And we kind of live in that culture in a way. But kids are valuable separate from you. And that's kind of pretty good and pretty interesting to think about, okay? These days, a kid, when you think about it, is you have a kid, you kind of take care of them. They're more expensive. To a lot of people, they're a liability, by the way. And then they go to school, they're there for like 8 hours, they come back home, they're on a tablet, and then you're like, well, what's the point of all this, And the truth is, that's the way the system is built out. But is that the true way that it should be? No. Kids are valuable. Kids can do a lot of tasks around the house. Kids can take care of you in the future. And when you hear things like that, people start to say, well, are you going to have kids so they can take care of you, whatever? I learned something too in this book, that back in the day, when kids, became adults and they had like their own households and their own families, and then the parent came to live with the household of the kid, it wasn't like the parent came with nothing. The parent usually like left behind the business, left behind the money they had or whatever, and they bring that to the home, and they're being taken care of, not with like money and finances, but usually with like time and being helped out physically. And I think that's awesome. I think it's a lot better to take care of your family, to take care of your dad or your mom, than to have them, for example, in a nursery home, and then to pay for someone to do that for you, whatever. So it's a lot of great stuff in here. But kids have a massive amount of value. So I wrote some things down here. So kids are the future. Kids take care of their parents. Kids help with their parents around the house, with the business and so on, because you can raise a child to grow into your business and to depend on that as far as for income and so on. And I saw some kids, I was reading an article about this, 6 and 8, if I'm not mistaken, and this family lived on a farm, and the kids were like waking up at an early time, and they were like picking up the eggs and feeding the chickens and watering the garden and all this stuff. And you probably think, wow, that's child labor, that's abuse. And the answer is, I really don't understand the problem with child labor. I see the problem with the industrial labor that we had back then in the revolution, where you had kids and you put them into factories and you had them reaching down things and kids losing limbs and arms and working 12-hour shifts. I see a problem with that, but I don't see a problem with kids actually working around the house and actually doing things and being helpful. It's almost like a kid is useless as far as work goes until they're 16, and that's not true. There are a lot of things kids can do, a lot of ways kids can help out, a lot of ways kids can be useful. And I think we see that problem today because now kids don't have those things to do anymore, and now what kids usually do, and adults too, is they're just on their phones, and they're just like on TikTok, and they're just, for example, like on YouTube. And your kids are not just being raised by you, because usually the parents are too busy, but they're being indoctrinated by the school system and those thoughts and those ideas and those ideals. And they're also being indoctrinated by what they see on the YouTube and the TV and everything else, So you have kids that didn't really know anything about anything. And that's kind of ridiculous because, when you go back and you think about like, wow, by the age of 14 or like 13, kids were kind of like considered like men in a way. It's not to say like, well, we're going to grab those kids and you should be doing this and that, but no, like it goes to tell you that kids can be useful and do things. And a kid doesn't have to be 18 to then go to another college to then finally at 26 start doing. I don't know where that system comes from, but it's pretty garbage to me if you ask me, okay? Now, my fifth point here, and one of my final ones, or before I get to the last one, is going to be effectiveness versus efficiency. Effectiveness goes down to, doing something to get a preferred result. And then efficiency goes into trying to get a preferred result, but without wasting energy and resources and so on, right? That's efficiency. And effectiveness is like just trying to get the preferred result. Now, when you think about it, as far as, for example, like kids' education, what is the most effective way to educate your kids? And by the way, I'm not here trying to promote homeschooling as a whole and saying that everyone should be homeschooling, and if you're not homeschooling, you're an evil person. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about effectiveness versus efficiency. What is more effective? To have a mom or a dad at home teaching their kids and educating them with values and moral and ethics and like God and all that good stuff, or having a kid, for example, be in a school system where you have one teacher versus like 30 or 35 kids or whatever. What is more effective to get the desired goal to have a well-rounded, educated child? It's usually going to be the homeschooling part, right? To have two parents, one parent teaching and just like basically raising up this child versus having a kid in a school system for like 6 hours or whatever. But what is more like efficient as a whole? That's more effective for sure, but what's more efficient? To have one family take care of one, like a few kids or whatever, teach them or whatever? No. What's more efficient is going to be having one teacher teach a bunch of kids and a bunch of families' kids basically, and then have two parents working and doing whatever, and basically giving to the economy as a whole. You see what I'm saying here? A lot of the times you have to ask, it's not what normal is, it's not what's being done all the time, but it's why are these things being done? What is more effective? To cook at home and eat your meals at home and to buy whole foods as a whole, not Whole Foods the store, but whole foods, and to cook those and to eat those, right? More healthy and organic, or to eat at McDonald's. What's more effective? If the preferred goal is health, the answer is cooking at home. But what's less efficient? To cook at home. It's more efficient to just go to McDonald's and get whatever you want, and now you're full. But over the long term, it's not going to be what you actually want. Now, the last point I actually want to make here is going to be inheritance, free lunch, and ownership. I think when you have a household, and the author goes into this, a household, he talks about this. I never heard about this before, by the way, but kind of running it as a business, as an LLC, where each individual in the household has a share, where each individual in the household can make mistakes and is given the freedom to make certain mistakes, and is also given the freedom to basically lose everything they have potentially, but is instructed to preferably not do those things. Okay, so it's kind of interesting, when we're raising our kids and we're raising our children, a lot of the times we're raising them and in a way to just give more to the system, to make the system bigger, to add to the job, to add to the spending, monetary and all this other stuff. But if you have a household as a whole and everyone has ownership and everyone has a part to play and everyone is contributing, well, that's also pretty good, right? Because it's not just about, well, I'm waiting until dad dies or mom dies so I can inherit something. But it's no, I'm an owner now and I have a role to play now and I'm a part of this and I contribute and this is important and I know how this works. I think that's a lot more better, to give your kids values, respect, instruction, and the things they really need. When I wrote a few things here that I kind of want to go over that I almost missed, but when a kid goes to school and after 18 years, again, efficiency, effectiveness, what do they walk away with? Do they walk away with the ability to cook? No. Do they walk away with the ability to fix things around the house? No. Do they walk away with knowing how to raise a family? No. Do they walk away with knowing how to be a man or knowing how to be a woman? No. Do they walk away knowing how to make an income or knowing how to defend themselves? The answer is no and no. So you walk away with this standardized education about some math, some science, some stuff here and there, and now you're finally, after all this, you're going to go to a place called college. And when you go to the college part, well, after 4 years or 2 years or 6 years or 8 years for some people, you walk away with a skill to finally be able to work and sustain yourself in a way. But you walk with just the ability to make money, but without the ability to know what to do with the money, information to know how money actually works, to know how to sustain a family, to know how to raise a family, all these things. You don't walk away with any of that stuff. So it's kind of insane. And when you think about the system as a whole, do you really need to be 18 years old or to graduate high school to finally start learning a skill to sustain yourself? The answer is, of course you don't. You don't have to go through all those things to finally know how to get a skill to sustain yourself. It's ridiculous. And do you need to walk away with a bunch of debt and all this stuff? The answer is no. So I think teaching your kids these things, having your family, and trying to raise a family as a real family, a nuclear family, not just where it's a condo. You have individuals that live here, and we all know each other's names, but we don't really know each other's lives, and we don't really have a life in a way, right? It's insane. We only just contribute to the economy and to our jobs and to our bosses or whatever. But what are we contributing to as far as like a family? You know, I think I think this book led me into doing a lot more research on the past and how things actually used to be and why things were that way. And it even made me think because for a while I had the idea of, like buying a house in the city and living there and all this stuff, and I would have all the conveniences, to have the supermarket over there, to have that over there and all this stuff over there. And it made me go like, why do I really want those things? And why don't I know how to do anything around the house? Why don't I know how to fix a leaky pipe? It made me question all those things, and it made me want to be better about all those things, and I'm learning how to do those things. And it made me ask myself, why don't I want to live maybe further away from the city, from all the noise, where I can have a bigger piece of land for cheaper, and I can just potentially even raise my own food, raise my own cattle, whatever, know what I'm eating, and just basically, when I have kids, God willing, raise my kids. Now, I'll tell you guys this, okay, because this is very important, because people usually go to this, and it's like, that's hard. It is. That's inconvenient. It is. That's bothersome. It is. Teaching kids, I'm not proficient in that. I'm not a teacher. And people kind of, I don't like the idea of thinking that what qualifies you to do something is a school or a college. Once you have a piece of paper, you're qualified. No, some things you're qualified to do right when you do them. For example, are you qualified to be a father? You are. You know what? Because you have a kid. So you're qualified because you just did that. So now you got to get those skills to become a good father in a way, right? Same thing for a mother. Same thing for being a husband. Am I married to the right person? Did you marry that person? You're married to the right person. That's the one. That's the one in the marriage license. There are all these fluffy ideas that we have today that we don't question and we just go along with. And I think that's enough. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Is the book controversial? The answer is it's controversial in 2020 or 2024. I think we're in 2024. Yeah, we're in 2024. It's controversial in 2024, but I think you read this book to someone in the 1800s or the 1900s. They were like, okay, so what's the point? I get it. This is normal stuff. Like, what's going on here? But today is controversial. So I highly recommend this book. The author was great. I seen maybe like one interview that he basically did. So here's the book. Take a picture of it. You can get it on Amazon. And when you get a book, don't get it like me that is basically shattered into pieces. But this book was definitely worth the read. Guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.